Hello and welcome to Driving Visibility Through Immersive Online Merchandising. This automotive news power training webinar is brought to you by HomeNet. We're delighted you're with us today. I'm Hannah Lutz, Finance and Insurance Editor at Automotive News. Before I introduce our speaker today, a few navigation tips. First, we encourage you to ask questions at any time. Just type them into the Q&A box on the left side of your webinar window and then hit Submit. I will steer your questions to our speaker toward the end of the session. Also, to enlarge the slides, just grab the frame with your mouse and pull it larger. And to download the slides, click on the Handouts icon at the bottom of your console. Today's speaker is Russ Daniels. Russ is Senior Manager of Product Marketing for HomeNet Automotive and vAuto. His primary focus over the past few years has been working with HomeNet sales and business development teams to launch innovative merchandising and syndication product offerings for dealers and industry partners. And now I'll turn it over to Russ to get us started.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks everybody for coming into the webinar today. Thank you to Automotive News. Really excited to talk with all of you today about a topic that I've been thinking deep thoughts about for the past decade, and I've seen it evolve in the automotive space, and that's online merchandising and the importance of it. But as we saw online merchandising in the automotive space start to kind of come forward, there was other technologies coming into market that we use every day. And you just see a couple examples of those on the slide here. You've got Netflix, you got Uber. I'm sure everybody on the webinar here today has used one, if not all of these devices, and some of them you use every day. And the reason I show these to you today is to kind of level set on consumer expectations in regards to technology. Consumers today, and we're all consumers of technology, we're all consumers of advertising, merchandising, and marketing in other verticals and in automotive. And our demand for high quality information, quick, is higher than it ever has been before. Because we've all been there, right? You've called an Uber where you're at and they can't seem to find your location. Or you've turned on Netflix and you've kind of got that spinning wheel of loading. And what happens when those things occur? We get really frustrated as consumers of information. This high quality information, this innovation is not at our fingertips exactly when we want it. And that's kind of where consumer expectations are today. And as we move it into our space, which is automotive, we see those same types of expectations when consumers are shopping for cars online. And as dealerships, we really need to think about how we differentiate our product online and create that high quality information and deliver it to the fingertips of the consumers fast. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit today. Really focus in on online merchandising and really kind of bring through these three truths of merchandising that I've witnessed over the last several years in the topic. Now, when I go through all of these things, we're going to talk about new technology, we're going to talk about best practices, but my promise to you today is that all of this information is validated through research and data. I really, over the last couple of years, my team has worked to quantify merchandising and the impact on consumers and the impact on your business as dealerships, and how those two worlds can really come together to create a better experience for consumers, but also, obviously drive some profitability to your bottom line. Before we even jumped into any of that, I wanted to validate that statement and kind of level set on the dealership space's expectations of online merchandising. So we did that study, and what we found was over 80% of the dealers that we asked about the importance of merchandising really believe that quality merchandising can increase margin, reduce days to sell, improve the business operations overall. Yet when we asked that same group of dealers if they felt their merchandising presence online was highly differentiated, only 12% could say that. So as we go through the presentation today, keep in mind that need for high quality information delivered quickly to the fingertips of the consumer, and the fact that we know that merchandising can help drive increased profitability for our dealerships, but we need to kick it up a notch. And before we kick it up a notch, we want to kind of know what are the basic blocking and tackling elements of merchandising and how can we elevate that. And we can't really understand that until we go through kind of the first truth in our space. And that's that technology is changing. Again, like I said, I've been in this space for about 10 years now, and the tools and technology at our fingertips to perform differentiated and immersive merchandising treatments on our inventory is evolving quickly and changing. And there's new tools at our fingertips that we can use to really attract our target buyers. So I'm going to run through those really quick, and then we're going to start to get into consumer sentiment and how we measure that. But here's some new tools that I'm seeing on the, in the space emerging. So here's a visual here, one that is definitely upcoming and kind of here now, and that's 360 spin technology. And for anybody that's not aware of that, this is you walking around the car as a dealership, capturing a 360 spin that a consumer can click and interact and zoom into. There's a lot of different providers in the space providing this product and really providing an elevated level of merchandising. It's not quite photo, it's not quite video, it's somewhere in the middle, and it's immersive. And when you look at other verticals, Zappos comes to mind, but you can also think about the real estate industry and how they've adopted very similar technologies to really tout their product. They've seen increased success in those spaces. And it's because that experience is more immersive. You can watch a video, you can sift through it. Videos are extremely important and do drive vehicle details page clicks for your inventory. But think about this as a new technology to create a more immersive experience, something more targeted, where as a shopper, you can zoom in to the place that you exactly need to look at. You can tag different hotspots on the car. Technology is changing and enabling us to do this in a highly automated fashion. So there's still that basic blocking and tackling of merchandising, right? You still have the photos of the inventory. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to go into consumer engagement and VDPs for photos and vehicles in different scenarios, stock photos, multiple photos. But what we're looking at here is a technology that was around 10 years ago but has evolved very recently. And this is kind of making that car stand out. And it's making it stand out by eliminating distractions in the photo. So what you see here is a photo backgrounding type technology that, again, is being offered by providers across the space. And what it's doing is pretty simple, taking the vehicle out of the photo and transposing it onto backgrounds. And just some best practices that I've seen talking with dealers and using the technology myself is, you don't want to necessarily take a photo of a vehicle and put it, in front of your dealership right away. Sometimes there could be some angles and some issues with how you take the photos. I even saw it, and this isn't even a joke, and for folks that have been in the space for a while, they've seen this too. They would put the photos backgrounded on the beach or on Mars, some kind of fake background. That's not what I'm talking about here. You see it kind of like examples on the bottom, kind of like a photo booth type background where the car stands out, you see the white background, it's obviously a yellow car, but you can eliminate distractions, and that also helps on a lot of the physical elements at the dealership as well. Maybe there's just some things in the background of the photo that you don't want in there, it's distracting. And again, as consumers want high quality information at their fingertips quick, to eliminate those distractions can really drive some immersive and differentiated merchandising for your dealership. I have some data to kind of show you as we move forward to help kind of validate and steer that a little bit. But the second thing is the investment and spatial limitations of putting an actual photo booth into your dealership. Now, if you have that today or considering it, that's certainly not a bad option. I mean, it creates a really, really good looking photo, a good looking video, a good looking 360, but we also know that sometimes you can't make that investment into putting a photo booth into the dealership. And one thing that commonly comes up is the space. So that you don't have enough space to put it in there to really be able to stand back and take the right photo. Also, if you're putting in a photo booth in your dealership, that could take away from some other elements at your dealership, whether that be extra service bays or places for detail to get cars physically frontline ready, which is also important. So with those kind of concerns and limitations in mind, looking into a photo backgrounding technology could be something that's interesting as we see this technology change. Keeping to the photo, I'm starting to see some best practices with dealers that I talk to, and we just have an example here around the actual content inside of the photo. So not just a backgrounded photo, but a photo that describes a little bit deeper level of information about the vehicle. Here's a really good example that I created for the presentation that has heated seats and heads-up display inside of the image overlay. Technology now is allowing us to do this on an individual vehicle or photo basis, and also allow some automation as well. For us, for us as dealers to be able to automatically get this on there and kind of give that time back to us to get back to the importance of selling cars and turning the inventory. But this is all really, really important information. We do studies in areas like vehicle condition, like equipment on the car, come up as areas of the shopping journey or information about the inventory consumers are looking for, but they don't always have access to. We also know that a lot of these things like heated seats, heads-up display, generic equipment details are going to exist in our vehicle details pages. They're going to be in the equipment list, or they're going to be in the vehicle description. These are all really good places to have that equipment. But we know that when they go onto that vehicle details page, they're going to immerse themselves in the media that you show them, whether that be photos and video, 360, types of technologies like that. Well, they're interacting with that. We know that for sure. So when they get there, to have content like equipment relevant to the car, a low mileage vehicle, a vehicle that just came in off lease, even something as simple as a Carfax One owner, in addition to your dealership branding, is another way to leverage technology to differentiate how you merchandise your inventory online. And then finally, not a new technology, while technology is changing in the vehicle description space, still very important to have vehicle descriptions. And not only does that tell the story of the inventory, allow them to read a little bit more on the details of the car they're looking for, there's significant implications to search relevancy, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. But here's kind of my 3 Bs. If you've heard me kind of go through this before, kind of kept it pretty standard, still stays the same. You want to be specific about the inventory, talk about this VIN. You want to build a connection. Let's talk about your dealership, your impact on the community, or awards that you've won. Let's tell a little bit about your dealership story to build that connection with the shopper before they come in or interact with you online. And then balance the message with industry accolades, awards, editorials, different awards that the inventory you're merchandising is getting, just because these companies are spending big dollars in marketing on commercials and traditional advertising to talk about their brands, and to be able to connect your product to that, it could be an effective way to differentiate yourself. I'll say 2 more things on descriptions before we move on. First of all, they absolutely do matter. Vehicles with descriptions get 27% more VDPs than vehicles without. That's a study off of AutoTrader, so third-party site statistics. So obviously important to have it on there versus not. Again, I'll get into relevancy in a second. And then the second piece is, again, technology is changing. So there's ways to automate these vehicle descriptions to make sure on day one, when you're getting your car through reconditioning or getting it ready to be frontline ready, you have a description on that car right away. I've been talking to dealers and my dealer friends about this for years, and I always ask them, what do you do to generate vehicle descriptions? And some will automate the process. Others will be adamant about writing out the vehicle description. I'm the product expert. I'm the subject matter expert. So I want to get there and I want to write a vehicle description. And writing it yourself is not a bad strategy, especially that's correct. We are the subject matter experts. But how long is that taking? Let's think about it as a function of time. Is it taking you 7 days after you get the car in from auction or in from the trade to get it through detail, then write a description? Well, these are valuable days that you aren't merchandising the inventory, and it's costing you VDPs. So my recommendation is always to use technology to automate the process, and then go back in and kind of put your own level of detail on it as time permits. That way you're getting something on day one, and you can still put your subject matter expertise in play when writing the vehicle description. So a lot of new technologies and technologies that have been around but are getting better. But why would we do this? What is the importance of all of it? And it's because when you think about how consumers are shopping for products today, that's absolutely evolving. And again, we're all consumers of goods. And, you can think even 5 years ago, when Amazon was really kind of emerging and how that changed e-commerce. The consumer behavior is evolving in all the different areas of e-commerce, and it's definitely impacting the automotive space as well. And it's going back to kind of the beginning of this webinar when I talked about consumers demanding high quality information, and they need it at their fingertips quick to make an informed buying decision. And that is validated pretty clearly by the Cox Automotive 2018 Car Buyer Journey Study. And just a quick little aside, the next version of that is coming out here shortly. And this is what they found in that study, and we are focusing now specifically on used car shoppers. Year over year, they're spending fewer days in market and going to fewer sites to make a purchasing decision. Yet, the stat we get back is 88% of all car shopping starts online, and I honestly think that that data is a little bit low. I think a lot more than 88% of car shopping starts online. But what does this tell us? This tells us that consumers are getting smarter and they're looking for information quicker, and we need to put it at their fingertips as fast as possible. So we need to know where they are, and we need to know what content they want to interact with to be able to make that purchasing decision. So I thought this information was really valuable. So I wanted to take it to the next step, and all of the next section is all consumer studies that I've kind of ran over the last year or year and a half to kind of validate this notion of spending less time, yet still having the internet and web-based shopping dominate. So I took it a layer deeper, and I wanted to ask consumers what areas of interactive content are very or extremely important to you taking the next step to making a purchasing decision, whether that's going into the dealership or interacting with the dealership in a digital retailing experience. We didn't really care one way or the other. We just wanted to know what type of content is moving you forward. And we kind of had the usual suspects. We talked about some of these already. They're all familiar. Descriptions, photos specific to the vehicle, interactive photos of the vehicle. That's 360. That's what we meant by that. Video of the vehicle, and then stock photos. And you can see photos still really driving a lot of that relevance, and I think it's because of just, we're trained to kind of put photos on our inventory, and the photos really kind of put the car front and center. But there's these new technologies that are coming up, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the interactive photos and 360 as well, and what the consumer sentiment is there. Again, you've got descriptions a little bit lower than the rest, but again, think about that as relevancy. Think about you leveraging vehicle descriptions to fully merchandise the inventory to really send it to the top of the list when consumers are searching for your cars. Talk about video as well. I mean, video continues to be important, and the video space continues to be evolved in automotive. And I always say, if you have photos of the car and you have a good process there, and you can get some stitched video, some video through stitched photos, that always helps as well. And if you want to be selective and shoot some live video walkarounds on some high value pieces of inventory or some struggling pieces of inventory, just trying to refresh and re-merchandise that inventory, definitely a good strategy there. Vehicles with video get 18% more VDPs than inventory without video, so definitely something to consider. And then obviously the growing piece is that interactive photos, that 360 piece. So let's dive a little bit deeper into consumer perspective and 360. We wanted to kind of take a look at, is this actually valuable to recent in-market shoppers? We talked to shoppers that recently bought or leased a car. Over 70% said that leveraging a 360 was extremely valuable in making that decision for them. And we also wanted to, as we do for a lot of the newer technologies before we bring it to market for the brands that I work on, we want to make sure that it is putting the dealership reputation or perception in a good light. So 80% of consumers who browse for vehicles think 360 displays reflect well on the dealer's reputation. This is back to that innovative and kind of changing with the new way that consumers want to buy and they want to shop. And 360 is, again, that immersive media that can help them along that path quicker and get them into your dealership to test drive that inventory and take it off your lot. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I just thought this was very interesting as well. We wanted to kind of get into some user experience work as well when it came to car shoppers and how they want to interact with 360. Do they want it to be spinning right away, right when they get on the vehicle details page? Do they want it on the vehicle details page only? Do they want it on the search results page? Do they want complete control? And you could see some pretty overwhelming sentiment back from consumers that we talked to around how they want to control and interact with 360. And I say that for all my dealer friends and also vendor friends on the phone as well and in the webinar, as we talk about adopting and really taking 360 to the next level. And we really want to implement it right to be what's best for the consumer, which will be best for our business. Think about this from an implementation perspective. But you can see I'm starting to walk through kind of the consumer validated data that aligns with some of the new technology. So we talked about 360 earlier, then we moved to backgrounding. So we also wanted to do some consumer appeal on backgrounding to really see if it was kind of worth the investment from a dealership side. So we did that in a couple different ways. First, we wanted to do some buyer appeal studies. We wanted to show them a photo of a piece of inventory, and we wanted to show it to them with a background. And we wanted to say which one is more appealing in terms of driving you to the next steps of buying that car. And you can see a 15% lift in the backgrounded photo versus the non-backgrounded photo. In that same study, we told consumers that this is a backgrounded photo, just in case they couldn't figure it out themselves. And what is the impact on the perception of the dealership? Do they find that to be false marketing? Are they embellishing things? And they said, in fact, that's not the case. In fact, the perception of the dealership actually increased in the very to somewhat appealing category. So just some things to consider around consumer appeal and impact on the dealership perception. But we can also go in and quantify this from the perspective of vehicle details pages. Now, not a huge lift on backgrounded photos versus cars with photos, but it was enough to kind of consider and share here with the audience. What we did was we looked at about 70 dealerships, several thousand vehicles over the course of 90 days, and we looked at another 100 dealerships that weren't doing backgrounding. So sample size with backgrounding, same kind of area, same kind of product tier, and we also gave the non-backgrounded photos same product tier. And what we tracked that over 90 days, we found that backgrounded photos do get a 5% lift from the search results page to the vehicle details page. So again, not a lot, but as we're thinking again about making that investment in photo booth, as we're thinking about how we differentiate online and even elevate what we're doing from a photo perspective, you can think about photo backgrounding as that solution there. So after backgrounding, when we talked about technology changing, we also talked about doing some interesting things from a photo overlay perspective, outside of just the dealership branding, the phone number, the website, kind of putting some relevant content specific to the inventory within the photos. And we wanted to kind of get the consumer's perspective on what they liked most. Because if you think about, I want the information fast and I want it high quality, maybe nav Bluetooth, maybe that'd be enough. So they could quickly see it, quickly understand it, and move on. But they actually interacted with it the opposite way. When you think about, the full navigation system and Bluetooth connection. And that differentiation there is between, I think that's between new and used cars. So that's the differentiation in the percentages. So when we're going to go adopt this technology and bring equipment details in, let's list the full equipment out. If it's not equipment, if it's low mileage, or if it's a Carfax One owner, let's be specific in that call out. Obviously, we don't want to flood the photo too much with text and other pieces like that, but just think about how you can fully spell it out, help them fully understand, immerse themselves deeper in the story you're trying to convey. Another really interesting best practice here that I've seen is, navigation and Bluetooth. That's kind of there within the photo at the bottom, and that's a good strategy. But I've also seen dealers kind of do it as teasers. Maybe it's in the exterior photos, kind of talk about having a navigation system or a Bluetooth connection. While the photo isn't exactly showing them that makes them want to move forward in the photo stream to be able to find out more details and actually go find that equipment detail. Also, don't hesitate to put a supplemental photo or what I call a quick commercial into your photo stream where you talk about your service plan or you talk about what differentiates your dealership. I see a lot of high-performing merchandising dealers do that and find success. Just a couple tidbits. I think one of the pieces that's most interesting is the equipment details on the car and being able to surface that to the top of the vehicle details page. So, as we want to go and take that on, just remember what those top features are to consumers. And this was a Cox Automotive study specific on the KBB side, where we grouped different features in different categories, and we wanted to rate the most important appealing features. And I listed those here. And a lot of these are going to come in off of a standard VIN code inside of your inventory tool. You might need build level data in order to uncover these, and that's becoming more exposed for retail inventory, which is a really good sign. So as we talk about writing really good vehicle descriptions or auto-generating them, or we talk about taking that next step of immersive experiences inside of our overlays, let's make sure that they align as much as they can to the top requested features from consumers. So we kind of talked about the different areas of merchandising and how those impact the consumer, but the other piece is that, out of those 4 Ps of marketing, from my undergrad in marketing, I remember that at least, is the place as well. Let's make sure you're in the right place. And we see a lot of shifts going on there from some traditional advertising sites into Google and Facebook spend. Now, we're seeing that shift, that's evident, but there's also some sources to list your inventory where budget isn't as much of a concern. And Facebook Marketplace is one of those destinations where you can put your used car listings, syndicate them with merchandising right onto the Facebook Marketplace. I stay very close with the Facebook Marketplace team. The automotive sector of Facebook Marketplace is growing, one of their highest growing segments. You can see the quote there from the Facebook product manager that I have. And we're working on case studies with dealers that are, leveraging merchandising tools and getting on Facebook Marketplace and just seeing, really, really exceptional results. And, for it being kind of free for you to get your inventory on there at no charge, Facebook's not going to charge you to be on Marketplace. Definitely something to consider, and definitely a growing destination for once you have your merchandising differentiated and you have it to where you need it to be. This is a new place that you could go and get more exposure and get more awareness and leads and interaction with consumers. But we obviously still want to focus on traditional advertising sites. We still see, just significant traffic to those sites and significant activity. Specific to AutoTrader, and tie this back into merchandising, I've brought this up a few times, as you get into their relevant search, how you show up on AutoTrader at the top of the list, it's going to be based on some shopper behavior, but merchandising is one of the drivers of how you show up. So this goes back to the automation of the process and the efficiency of the process. So take good photos, take them efficiently and as quickly as possible. I'm always the fan of taking a short shoot of photos on the used car side before reconditioning. And then once those new cars come off the truck, just a couple exterior photos just to get something online quicker with an automated vehicle description. So you can start to get eyeballs and VDPs earlier in the process. And you can always go back and re-merchandise and do different descriptions and, capture a full set of photos. We'll get into that in just a moment. But again, it's not only just making that car stand out and having that experience that connects with the shoppers. Efficient and complete merchandising can really help how you show up in a search ranking. So we talked a lot about how technology is changing. We talked about consumer behavior and how they're kind of adopting and interacting with these new technologies. Let's go to the final part now where we talk about measuring, really quantifying the impact of merchandising across the board. And, we do that in a variety of different ways, and really, really happy to show some updated numbers. If you've heard me kind of speak on this topic, I've been doing kind of this photo engagement bucket exercise. It's going on 3 years now. And actually the first here at the Automotive News webinar, this is the first time we're showcasing this to an audience. We literally just pulled this in from site stats from Cox Automotive. And if you haven't seen this before, you can't figure it out, what we're doing here is we're looking at inventory in different scenarios when it comes to the photos that are associated with the inventory. For example, you've got a scenario with stock photos versus no photos, and now you can go through. So multiple custom photos versus no photos, single photo versus a stock photo, and we break that up between used and new. And what you're looking at is the increases in VDPs per listing for the first scenario versus the second scenario. So you can read this now. I'm going to point out just a few common scenarios that we experience, that I see and that I get asked about a lot. So the first one is, do we put a representational image on or a stock photo, or do we do no photo at all? We do see a slight lift in VDPs across both for stock photos versus no photos. Multiple photos versus no photos, I think we got that. I think we understand that. You go down to the third one. This one is very interesting. A single custom photo versus a stock photo. 193% increase in VDPs for used, 173% increase in VDPs for new, for the single photo versus stock photo. So what does this speak to? This speaks to that efficiency play. This speaks to considering taking a shorter shoot of photos, even if it's just one exterior or just a few exteriors before reconditioning or right after reconditioning, depending on your process, especially on the new car side when a car comes right off the or off the truck or a fresh deal or trade, be able to get those just a single photo online early, just to drive that increased visibility and vehicle details page clicks. Always going to recommend you to go back and shoot a full set of photos, and we'll kind of go into average photos consumers are looking for and average photos we're seeing in the data in just a second. But definitely an increase here to have a single photo on instead of leaving that stock photo out. I think the next one down is, it kind of is eye-opening. My eyes got wide when I saw it because this increases year over year. It's the biggest increase that we've seen. And this is multiple custom photos versus stock photo. Just significant VDP increases. You can read those numbers there. Those are commas, not dot. It's not 1.6. It's 1,622% more VDPs on the used car side with multiple custom photos versus stock photo. What does this speak to? This speaks to, again, consumers wanting that real authentic, high-quality information, and they want it fast. And when they're looking at cars, they understand that this is a stock photo. This isn't going to connect me with the inventory directly. I want to look at real photos, and even a single photo, going back to the last point, will be helpful there. The second to last one, this is another kind of operational question that I get asked a lot. It's, okay, I have a single photo before it goes to reconditioning. Maybe it was an off-lease unit. It's in okay shape. I did want to get some basic reconditioning work done. Does it make sense? Do I get additional VDPs? Is there additional engagement to shooting a full set of photos after I already have a single custom photo on the internet for maybe 12 days or 14 days? And we see pretty steady, actually, across new and used increases in engagement for multiple custom photos versus single. On a lot of third-party sites and websites, when you're on a search results page, it's going to show you how many photos are on that inventory, and we're seeing an increased clicks for cars that have that, 10 or above or, 20 or above photos instead of a single photo there. And then just rounding out this data, we're looking now at multiple custom photos with price versus no price. So now we're getting into your pricing strategy, and you can see obvious VDP increases there. A lot of that is shopping based on kind of the range of price that you're wanting to pay. A lot of times how they sort is obviously based on price. So absolutely, price is a part of this merchandising ecosystem that you need to complete, and we see significant engagement when you have all of those pieces together. So this is some new data, preference versus data, and I think this is more like I'll make a bit of a recommendation here, but just wanted to put the data in front of you and let you kind of take a look. So we did a consumer study, the average amount of photos that consumers are expecting on a new car or a used car. You could see that's pretty low compared to the average. We looked at over 7 million cars currently online and took an average amount of photos for new car versus used car, and you can see that on the right. 18 on the new car side, 24 on the used car side, so a lot more than what consumers are expecting. So what do we want to do with this data? Because meanwhile, data that we have from AutoTrader says the more photos that you put on the unit, the more VDPs you're going to drive. My recommendation is always think about the car, think about what's going to really connect the shopper with the inventory. If it's got sunroof, if it's got those features that are unique, make sure you're including them. I do see dealers and other providers that go out and perform merchandising kind of have their standard way of taking photos, and that's definitely a great start. What you also want to do is focus on the inventory and, just think that, 70, 80 photos on a pretty standard sedan is probably not needed. Now, if you have a fully loaded truck with a lot of extra features and things you really need to talk about, going above that 18 or 24 on the average photos from a data-driven perspective is also a smart idea to do. So this is kind of what consumers are expecting. This is what the data is showing us. But my recommendation is think about the car, have your process, and make sure you're focusing on those unique features of the inventory. And once you all put together, now you want to think about merchandising operations. So we understand technology and how that's evolved and changed to help the business. We understand consumers, and we understand kind of how to measure engagement. And so how do we put that all together from an efficiency play? Back to, hey, consumers aren't interacting with stock photos, and that's the type of imagery that's on your inventory if you're waiting for the car to get fully through recon, or if you're waiting that 10 to 14 days, which is a lot of the industry average that we see. How can you bring that down? The first way you think about that is properly measuring it. And this is a spreadsheet that basically started with a dealer group that, I kind of took that out and put it into the slide here, where you're looking at a 5 rooftop group and you're looking at basically their time to market and how they're tracking it in days, hours, and minutes. and you're looking at the photo time to market, pricing time to market, description. You're kind of looking at a 28-day rolling time to market, how that's doing in the current month, and how you're doing the previous month. A couple of quick call outs here. So the description, it's zeroed out all across the board. So what does that mean? That means they're leveraging technology to automate the process. So as soon as that unit hits their inventory tool, they're automatically generating a vehicle description. So that's why that's zeroed out. Just a good best practice to drive that time to market down and, again, get those eyeballs onto AutoTrader and the other sites that really rank based on merchandising completeness. You can also look at all the different categories as a dealer group and say, okay, you got dealer 1, they have a pretty good process for photos, taking them about 8 days for when we see the car to get the full set of photos on. But going down to dealer 5, it's taking them, over 13 days, almost 14 days to get that done. So let's dig into why that's happening. Is it a breakdown in reconditioning? Is it a process with technology that we can fix? Is it a resource issue? We could just have better conversations about how to fix the problems to drive down that time to market using tools and processes to track it similar to this. So I'm going to leave you with this because this is a pretty compelling kind of digital marketing merchandising study that I came across a little bit over a year ago from a company called SpeedShift Media. What they wanted to do is kind of track all the different interactions on a vehicle details page to really look at across all of these areas of engagement on a vehicle details page. The more they're kind of interacted with, does that correlate to the vehicle selling? So more of it, can you draw a conclusion between that and the car selling? And they looked at form submissions, your traditional leads, looked at media, so clicks with photos, videos, different types of media there. They looked at links like Carfax and things like that, text and chat, and social sharing. They did that across over 100 dealerships, over 50,000 vehicles, looked at it for 6 months. So what did they find? So when you look at the correlation here, you see that only media engagement increased in frequency the closer the vehicle was to the sell date. So the more the vehicle is being interacted with, the photos, being looked through, getting ready to go into that dealership and test drive, they saw a significant 38% frequency increase the closer that vehicle was to selling, where the other one stayed flat. So I'm not saying that form submissions or links or text chat, social sharing aren't important elements to have on your vehicle details page. They absolutely are important elements to have on your vehicle details page. But what this study found was the more the media is interacted with, that correlates to the car being closer to selling. And when we can understand that, we can really start to do some interesting things around our merchandising. We can do really interesting things with our pricing strategy if we understand the type of engagement our media is getting to make better decisions about how to improve our profitability and our process when it comes to the overall business, while creating that immersive merchandising experience that consumers are looking for. So key takeaways, we focused on a lot of that. You want to make sure you're shortening your time because we're seeing that significant increase in VDPs for even a single real photo versus a stock photo. Photos and descriptions, obviously those enhanced with better equipment details and things of that nature. Make sure those align to consumer preference, leverage build level installed options and things like that. And as we move forward, let's continue to quantify merchandising and marketing to make sure we're delivering that personalized experience and really kind of understand how to be an expert in this space of merchandising and use the data that we have as a key performance indicator. So with that, Hannah, I'll kick it back over to you and we'll have some time for some questions.
Thank you, Russ. And just a reminder to the audience, there's still time to ask your questions. Just go to the Q&A box on the left side of your screen. So to start, I wanted to ask you, what are some best practices for actually shooting those photos before and after reconditioning? Should dealers reshoot the entire set? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that is a good question. You know, with a lot of these answers, it's always going to depend on the car. I mean, if you get a car from auction or you get a car from trade that's in bad shape and it needs significant body work and significant detail work, you don't want to shoot those photos. Obviously, that short shoot of photos, you want to make sure you have that car frontline ready to shoot the full set. But what I recommend is if you do have a unit that is, kind of good for a short shoot of photos, capture those photos, get the car through reconditioning, and then go through and shoot a full set again at the right angles using the standard process, and maybe highlighting some more of those differentiated features and elements of the vehicle that'll help it stand out. So I would definitely shoot a full set after it's through reconditioning.
What are some best practices for return on investment with posting vehicle photos on Facebook Marketplace?
Yeah, and that's a really, really good question. We're getting some of that data back now. We actually are working with Facebook on a case study now that's going to show that, so more to come there. I don't have the data offhand, but I know that there was significant chat engagements, significant leads submitted. I mean, we're talking, across the dealer group in the 1,000+ range. So more to come there. We'll obviously have that case study published, but I was surprised at the ROI and kind of return on investment, return on engagement that we're seeing on Facebook Marketplace. It was astounding, yeah.
Do you recommend using any dealership branding in the background of the photo, or should it be pretty neutral or blank?
Good question. I think dealer branding is always a good idea. I think especially on third-party listing sites, when you're kind of competing with other dealers in your area, you want to make sure you're putting your branding front and center. I think as you move deeper into the photo stream, it might be good to do it in the middle and then at the end just to remind them. But I would say as you move through the photo stream, think about that. Think a little bit less about the branding after the first photo and kind of towards the middle, like a middle photo and a last. And think about the interactive content that you can put in there, or the more detailed content about the car. And then when it comes to backgrounding, I think that holds true as well. I mean, you can have your, a dealership overlay on that first photo and have it backgrounded. You saw in that study there was a slight uptick into the photo backgrounded car with an overlay, but it wasn't really statistically a lot better or worse than having the photo background alone. I think the rules you have for real photos when it comes to backgrounding should be very similar to the actual photos that you capture, dealership branding with some immersive details about the inventory.
Okay. And then you also mentioned having some equipment called out in the image overlays. Is there anything else that's worth mentioning in the overlays?
Yeah, so two things there. So when we talk to consumers, things like vehicle condition come up in addition to equipment. When it comes to information they want more of, so Carfax One Owner is one thing. If you have a new set of tires on it, fresh out of detail, fresh paint, things like that, those types of condition information I think is definitely good. I'll say a second thing as well, just a best practice that I've seen. Try not to put content in there that might change over time. And what I mean by that is elements like price, for example. If that price is going to drop, you don't want to have inconsistency from the price that you have on your vehicle details page and your search results page compared to the photo. I mean, that's not good. So those really valuable details that stay relatively static over the life cycle of you having that car is the way to go in terms of putting the content in the overlays. Good question.
For dealers that maybe some smaller dealership groups who don't have a lot of tech resources or aren't tech savvy or photo savvy, how do you suggest they make sure their merchandising efforts are competitive?
I think that's a good question. I like to always dig into the individual process of the dealership that asks that, but I'll do some very basic ones. So the first thing is make sure you're fully merchandising the car. So get photos on that unit, get the description on that unit, get a price on that unit, get all that basic blocking and tackling in place, because that's going to help you from a relevancy perspective when car shoppers search for the inventory. So that's a good first thing. So make sure you have a process to get that basic blocking and tackling together. The second thing is you can be selective. When I mean you can be selective, I mean capturing like a live video walk around or capturing an interactive 360 spin, depending on what technology you want to adopt. Being selective at first about that. Maybe I don't want to commit to, because it's not feasible, putting a live walk-around video or a 360 spin on every single used car in my inventory. But there could be some distressed inventory. And when I mean distressed, I mean some aging inventory. Or there could be some inventory that you really want to tout, a really good trade or a really good car that you just brought in that you want to move quick and really tell that compelling story to move that car fast. That could be, a candidate to go do some more immersive merchandising. That way you're not putting blanket processes across the board. You do need to have that basic merchandising in place. You should be putting that time in to get that done or have a process to get that done, but be a little bit more selective about the immersive merchandising to differentiate certain pieces of inventory.
Okay. Do you have any tips for dealers on writing those vehicle descriptions? I mean, what phrases or specific words really stand out to customers?
Yeah. A couple things I touched on. I know we kind of covered a lot through the webinar, but the first piece is, those 3 Ds, right? So be specific, talk about the actual car, this 2019 year, make, model, trim, all the way down, specific details, build a connection, talk about your dealership, talk about where you're located, how long you've serviced the area. Also in the be specific, I forgot, that's a good place to have the build level options and equipment details. That'll help with long tail searches. So, especially on that luxury side where car shoppers are looking for very specific packages, very specific equipment on a luxury piece of inventory, being able to have those details in the description will obviously help with relevancy, and then you can balance the message. And I mean balance the message is leveraging KBB awards and accolades, or Edmunds editorials, or different car and driver awards, IIHS top safety pick, different awards and accolades like that to help you kind of show up and build that compelling description. And again, think about it first from an automation perspective. Can we auto-generate that description quickly and go back? It might not have every single piece of those details, but as we kind of can circle back and do that next level of merchandising, that can be things that you look for to really be specific if the tool isn't providing that today. Good question.
So when did photo engagement and the authenticity of the photo, just meaning that it's not a stock photo, it's from the dealership, when did that become so important, and why has it become that way?
So I started looking at that data starting in 2017. And the most compelling, the largest one is that multiple photo versus a stock photo category. It's like, over 1,600% more VDPs, just ridiculous. So 3 years ago, that was about at a little bit less than 200% more VDPs in that category. Last year, it went up to about 350% more VDPs in that category. And then obviously that skyrocketed up into the thousands. And I think, with a lot of that getting pulled from AutoTrader data, how they kind of modified their search drove that. So if you go back 3 years, and even if you kind of level that off even this year's numbers, you can see steady engagement increases for real photos versus stock photos. I would say that when you think about coverage of inventory with photos on the new and used car side, when I started thinking about this 10 years ago, it just significant increases in the coverage of vehicles that have real photos versus stock photos. And the new car side is a continual challenge, and there's definitely some understanding as to why the new car side is a challenge, but we're seeing more and more engagement and behavior from dealers putting real photos onto new cars as well, just to help them move faster and get them through the process. So again, started looking at it 3 years ago, and just every year it just significantly increases. Don't know really before then, but we're kind of seeing where it's going. And the real authentic visualization of merchandising the inventory is really driving the engagement of today. And I can't imagine it going down or not continuing to grow in the future.
Okay. So as you've studied this, what have you learned from other industries outside of auto about merchandising and how you apply that to auto retail? Yeah.
I mean, kind of back to the very beginning, I think the real estate market is a very interesting one to look at, and it's relevant because it's a purchase that it's not Amazon or Zappos. Like we might buy items on Amazon every day, or buy a new pair of shoes every every year, every now and again. In real estate, they're not you're not constantly buying houses. So how those are listed and kind of the description and the photos and how they tell the story and 360 walk-arounds and spins and videos have come into that space a little bit before I really saw them enter automotive in a big way. So just because of the nature of the buying cycle, that's something to keep in mind and keep a lookout on real estate. The second one is the level of purchase, right? I mean, a lot different between buying, a book on Audible, on the Amazon side and buying a car or a house. Those are, a car or a house are going to be the two biggest purchases most of us are ever going to make in our lives. So the way that it's mirrored from a buyer's perspective and a merchandising marketing perspective in real estate, I think that's a really good vertical to take a look at and what's working and what's not, and maps pretty well to the buying kind of habits and preferences for car shoppers today. It's at least as close as I've seen.
Okay, great. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our webinar today. Thanks to today's audience for the questions, and thanks to you, Russ. If you asked a question that we didn't have a chance to answer, HomeNet will follow up via email. And if you learned something from this session, please tell your peers about it. The recording will be available in about an hour, and you can find it at autonews.com/powertraining. When the webinar ends, a survey will pop up on your screen. Your feedback helps us get better. Thanks again to Russ and to HomeNet for bringing us this presentation, and to you for joining us. On behalf of everyone at Automotive News, enjoy the rest of your day.